right to freedom of expression to distort the position expressed during any voting season. This is in direct response to the United States now being exposed as conducting one of the most dishonest and manipulated elections ever seen in modern times, and whose latest atrocities include Special Counsel Robert Mueller, suspected of having ordered the brutal slaying of one of its past informants named Whitey Bulger, who was about to testify about FBI crimes, conveniently, and the anti-Trump mainstream media establishment blatantly trying to influence voters by their slamming President Trump with an astonishing 92% negative coverage of his presidency. All the while, the World Economic Forum having just announced that the United States has the most competitive economy in the world, obviously due to President Trump having created over 4 million plus jobs for the citizens of America, thus creating record low unemployment for African Americans and Latinos. One consuming only leftist mainstream media could rightfully get the impression that in less than 2 years since taking power, President Trump has turned America into a racist, despotic nightmare that only the Democrat Party could save, but who obviously forgot to warn the rest of the world of what President Trump has done, as evidenced by the tens of thousands of illegal brown-skinned Central American migrants who are now battling with Mexican police as they surge towards the U.S. southern border. Of course, it's absurd that anyone believing the Democrats and leftist mainstream media that President Trump has turned the United States into a despotic, racist, and jobless nightmare of a country, so too is it absurd for anyone still believing the Trump-Russian collusion fairy tale concocted by these insane election-manipulating maniacs that even the Democrats have given up on convincing the American citizen about, and as evidenced by new data showing that over a 4-week period through mid-October of 2018, 0.1% of ads aired in congressional races mentioned Russia, and there were 0 mentions of Russia in ads for U.S. Senate races as well. So, with their being denied having the Trump-Russian collusion fairy tale to influence the American citizen into voting for them, the Democrats and their leftist mainstream media allies fell back upon one of their tried and true manipulative election tactics of calling everyone opposing them racists, that in the past week alone has seen CNN's host Don Lemon declaring the white men are now the biggest terror threat the American citizens have ever faced in its history, who was quickly joined, obviously by the New York Times, saying that any white voter who doesn't vote for a Democrat African-American candidate is a white national terrorist, but both of whose pronouncements utterly failed to reality check, as it is only media and Democrat-inspired leftist mobs who have been documented over 600 times violently attacking Republican Party Trump supporters, officials, and offices. And of course, joining with the Democrats, leftist media, and tech giants to manipulate the American people before this crucial election, this report states that are the elites of Hollywood, whose favorite celebrity ice cream company Ben & Jerry's has now created for them a new flavor called Pecan Resist. They can soothe themselves with once President Trump is destroyed. That is apparently much needed, as evidenced by Hollywood producer Chuck Lorre inserting into his popular television program Big Bang Theory a flashcard calling for God to destroy all Trump supporters. Famous Hollywood actor Jim Carrey releasing his latest painting showing President Trump and his supporters being thrown into hell. Equally famous Hollywood character actor James Cromwell warning of the blood will be in the streets if Democrats don't win this election. And global Hollywood icon Barbra Streisand telling everyone that if the Democrats don't win, she's going to move to Canada. Well, hopefully. But whom someone should tell before she goes that the Canadian province of Ontario has just slashed its minimum wage and gutted labor standards. The Canadian province of Quebec just saw its pro-Trump anti-immigration party winning in a landslide victory, and whose national healthcare system has just been voted by international experts to be the worst in the entire industrialized world. But Barbara's rich, so she don't care. In spite of this massive Democrat leftist media tech giant and Hollywood attempting to manipulate the midterm elections, this report concludes that the American citizens are still refusing to be brainwashed by this onslaught of anti-President Trump propaganda, and that sees them preparing to throw out the power the most leftist governor in their nation, Kate Brown from the state of Oregon, and put in her place Newt Bueller, who will become the first Republican Party governor in the state in over 40 years, with these leftist elites becoming even more horrified at new polls showing President Trump's support among African American voters has risen to the historic level of 40%, thus causing the Democrats to proclaim that millennial voters will give them the blue wave needed to sweep them into power. But that stands in stark opposition to what these millennials themselves are saying about this election cycle. Samantha, age 22, who isn't voting because the 2016 election was such a delusional experience, she's crushed and can't bring herself to believe her vote counts because her chosen candidate lost. Or Reese, age 23, who is a borderline socialist, or was. She's not super sure and says talking about voting is really big in her circle of friends, but she just can't bring herself to do it. Tim, age 27, who does not understand how the post office works and says, I tried to register for the 2016 election, but it was beyond the deadline by the time I tried to do it. I hate mailing stuff. It gives me anxiety. And Megan, age 29, who has to print a form and mail it in to get an absentee ballot, but she doesn't own a printer and has no idea how to get stamps. Really. Drew, age 21, who admits she didn't know who Joe Biden was until after the election, and anyway, she just doesn't have the time and energy to vote. Anna, age 21, who is just a basket case because mailing something is hard, saying most people my age have zero need to go to the post office and may have never stepped into one before. Honestly, if someone had the forms printed for me and was willing to deal with the post office, I'd be much more inclined to vote. Jocelyn, age 27, who doesn't have a driver's license, so she has to register to vote in person, but she doesn't always feel like leaving home, so she didn't. And Thomas, age 28, who thinks voting is so passé and says, my polling place is at the end of my block. It takes no time at all. It's an extremely easy process, but I think that's also what makes it seem sort of alienating and anticlimactic. You go in and you're like, this is the climax of democracy? Like, the sticker on my chest is the climax of democracy?